you said you have a disability. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I was diagnosed when I was 22 years old with psoriatic arthritis, which is an autoimmune condition that attacks your joints. So I think when you hear arthritis, most people think of like, old people, rubbing their hands in commercials for like cream, and grandma having trouble, gardening because her, hands hurt. But psoriatic arthritis, which is an autoimmune condition, attacks the joints kind of from the inside out, and it's not from age, it's not from overuse, and it's a type of arthritis that does attack young people. It kind of stands alongside rheumatoid arthritis or juvenile arthritis, and it's often found in people who also have psoriasis, which is a skin condition. So they're kind of linked. So a lot of times people who have psoriasis also develop psoriatic arthritis, and that was the case with me. But for me, it started out as just knee pain, and I had like swelling around my knee, almost like a golf ball sized kind of sack of fluid that was just kind of like sitting next to my knee. My roommate at the time nicknamed it Lumpy the left knee. And I wasn't sure what was going on. And I thought perhaps it was because I was wearing Old Navy flip-flops in New York City and I should be wearing better footwear. So I got like custom orthotics made and bought like really nice shoes because I'm walking all around and going up and down stairs and stuff. But the pain got kind of like worse and worse. And finally, I saw a rheumatologist at the NYU Hospital for Joint Diseases and, explained all of the different symptoms that I was experiencing and the fact that like no orthopedist had been able to help and nobody really knew where it was coming from. And he kind of spun around in a chair and gave me a pamphlet all about psoriatic arthritis. My psoriatic arthritis has been very aggressive, I think, with the joint degeneration, from age 22 to 30, I experienced, various levels of pain and tried different pharmaceuticals that are marketed for it with, limited success. So I spent a lot of time just managing symptoms versus, managing the root cause. But by the age of, I would say like 29 and 30, I was really experiencing some pretty significant mobility challenges. I wasn't really able to stand for longer than like 5 or 10 minutes at a time without really feeling in a lot of pain, and like standing still in one spot was like really the worst. So of course like New York is the worst place for that because you're always like standing on the subway, standing waiting for the bus, like you're just standing. So that was really challenging. And then as my joints began to degenerate, I lost range of motion. So the ability to like fully like bend your knee all the way back and then fully extend your leg to like a flat 180. I started to lose the ability to like fully bend and flex the joint. So then I couldn't really stand up straight and I couldn't really take like a good solid like straight walk, like with a good gait where you're like striking the ground correctly as you walk. So because of that created like residual like back and hip pain from like being off kilter and off balance. So by the age of like 32, I was pretty much toast from a joint perspective in my lower extremities. And I moved back to my hometown here in Buffalo, and I knew that I was going to have some kind of surgery. And at that time, I didn't even really know what it was. But I ended up having my joints replaced. I had both my knees replaced, so I am titanium steel. And I was able to get probably about, I'd say 95% range of motion back in my leg on my right side. And I'd say about 85% range of motion back on my left side. So the pain profile is much, much better. But from a walking perspective, I'm still a little off kilter, which makes it really hard, mostly from that kind of residual pain of like feeling the pain in like your lower sacrum area, your back and your hips and stuff, just because your body is designed to work a certain way. And when things are not working a certain way, it just has this, knock-on effect of the rest of the system. So I identify as a wheelchair user. I'm someone that uses wheelchair and mobility aids. I can walk, and I think, that's one of the things that like blows people's minds. I think a lot of people have a very binary view of disability. You are either like fully disabled, you are either completely blind, completely paralyzed, or whatever it is, or you're perfectly fine. And I feel like it blows people's minds when they see someone like in a wheelchair, like stand up, or like, you know, someone who is walking, then get into a wheelchair. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the things that's been hardest as someone who has kind of taken on a disability as an adult, is to still feel like a fully active, independent, vibrant person who is able to do things for themselves, who is able to ambulate and walk in some instances, but would like to use mobility aids like a walker, a wheelchair, a cane, or whatever when the situation calls for it. And, you know, I'm never regretting choosing to use a mobility device. I always feel better. I will feel less in pain. I will feel less stressed out when I choose to use the devices that are available to me. But the thing that I really struggle with is like public perception. Like when someone sees you walking and then using a wheelchair, like in an airport, for instance, like you walk into the airport, but then you take wheelchair assistance, and like the public perception of like people just like, and, you know, it's part of it is like me receiving what I think they're perceiving, but you know, just like that outward judgment of like people like not believing you. Like one time I pulled into the handicap parking spot because I have a handicap placard, and like I parked, I did what I needed to do. I came back, and when I was like pulling out, like a woman was like wagging her finger at me and like pointing up to the sign. And I was like I had taken the placard out of my window because you're not supposed to drive with it. So like I felt like I had to like get my placard out of the, you know, glove compartment and like wave it back to her and be like, I'm allowed to be here. Like I'm allowed to exist. Just because I'm not 75 doesn't mean I can't park here, you know? So it's been this kind of weird emotional transition, weird physical transition, but just kind of like finding ways to, you know, use the things that are available to me, be comfortable in the world, and then like just, you know, this is why we pay for therapy, like work on not caring what other people think.
Yeah. I relate to a lot of what you said, and I think a lot of people listening relate to you and understand where you're coming from. You know, because, you know, I 100% agree. A lot of people think everything's really this or that, you know, black or white. You either like, and for vision, it's like, which is kind of what I talk about the most on this podcast, is because I have retinitis pigmentosa, is I'm in the process of losing my vision. So in certain situations, I feel like I have really good vision. And then there are certain situations where I feel like I have really terrible vision, and I need help from, you know, my wife or a friend, or I don't use a cane, and part of that, we'll talk about that in a second. But like, it's confusing for people around me because they're like, well, you saw really well when we were doing this. What happened here? And it's just like, or if something just hits that right perfect blind spot that I have in my vision, and then I don't see that, but then I saw something else, you know, it's just like, so yeah, I get what you're saying. People scratch their heads and they want it to be this or that. My mom is legally blind, and, you know, a lot of people don't even understand that because it's like, she can still see. It just means her field of vision's less than 20%. And in her case, it's like probably like 5% or something like that. So, but you say blind, just the word blind, you're like, well, you can't see nothing, you know, like, and if you can still see a little bit, then why can't you drive? Why can't you do this, and that? And, you know, like most things in life, there's a lot of gray area. Everything's more complex than people want to make it out to be. And that's kind of one of my biggest goals with this podcast, is just kind of exposing that there is a middle ground, and there is like someone who's in the beginning of their journey, like myself, and I experience symptoms, and I just want to talk about, you know, it, and there is a mental aspect to it, and I think you're talking about that a lot too, with what you expect people are thinking, or what you I guess imagine people are thinking, if they see you walking and then you get in a wheelchair. And that's kind of why, if it's like a dark situation or a place for me, if it's a dark situation or a really crowded kind of place where I could benefit from using a cane, I don't want to, because I don't want to sit down and then pull out my phone and then have people be like, that dude has a cane, but then he's looking at his phone. So I see well enough to where I can fake it. I can work around it enough. I have to move slower than maybe I would if I used a cane, but that's just a personal choice that I've had to make. And at some point in my life, it's just going to be no way around it. Like, I'm going to have to use a cane, and that's fine. I'm just not there mentally yet. So I get where you're coming from. And I just think that there needs to be a voice for the middle ground. And that's kind of what I want this podcast to be, or at least that's where my perspective on this podcast as the host is coming from, is someone in the process, newly diagnosed, in the process of experiencing symptoms and just trying to learn how to adapt, how others adapt. And, I appreciate you sharing that.